100 actually appear further down in the budget. Fire department expenses, we moved that down to $45,000. And maintenance and upgrade of fire equipment, requested $6,000, zero. So the total fire department requested was $345,622. What we had put in for the budget was $301,505. Building inspector. Building inspector requested $39,046. One of the things that we asked him to do is to take and go back and look at his budget, because he had put in for 25 hours, and this year he is only working 20 hours. And taking that into consideration, we put in $18,720. As you heard earlier, the administrative assistant, since we're going to consolidate into one building, they requested $25,839, and that was for 30 hours. We put that to zero. We figured that, as you heard, that could be covered by the individual in the selectman's office. Building inspector's expenses, $947. We put in $1,000 for that. Plumbing and gas inspector, they requested $4,250. Electrical inspector, $2,500. I'm not sure why he ended up asking for $2,500, because during our budget review, and I'm still scratching my head about it, I don't know about the rest of the board, he said because we have a solar farm going in, it's going to require the inspector to take and do more inspections. I don't know why he asked for less. But when talking with him, he said, you have more money in the gas and plumbing, let's combine that and call it professional services. That way there, we're not saying we have too much for one and not enough for the other. It's professional services, and he can pay for each of those services. He was very agreeable to that. In fact, I think he actually said something about going into another community and suggesting the same thing. So we combined those for $6,750. He requested $72,582. We budgeted $26,470. Seals of weight and measure. Requested $1,800. We put in the budget $1,800. That's basically a state requirement that we have to have some level of support there, and we didn't have any information as to, we know that that's pretty well expended on that. Animal inspector, this is the barn inspector. Requested is $1,500. What we budgeted was $500. Animal inspector expenses, they asked for $750. We put in $250. In this particular one, we looked at other communities also, and that's pretty well in line with a lot of communities. Emergency management. Emergency management asked for $1,985. We allocated $1,000. Because when we looked at the budget, we couldn't figure out why there was $1,000 for office supplies on a department that basically is only, I know that they do have some training, but that's a lot of money when we started comparing to other departments within the town, which they were using as much as an office expenses as everybody else. Animal control salary. I believe that's by contract, and this is the contract price. Am I correct then? Okay. requested was $21,890. We allocated $21,890. That's by contract. Tree warden requested $1,000 for salary. You don't see any allocation there. That's combining that into the highway department, into their budget. The same for the tree warden expenses, $5,880. Again, zero. That would be combined into the highway department's budget. Communications Commission requested $203,595. Budgeted under no override, $195. Communication expenses, $27,817. Allocated under no override was $20,814. Communications training requested $7,000. Allocated under no override, $2,500. Cell phone expenses, $5,000 was requested, zero was allocated. Going from what was requested is $243,412. What was allocated under the no override was $213,314. Pest control. Now, you'd think that that amount of money we wouldn't have a lot of discussion about. There was a lot of discussion about this. They requested $1,500. We allocated zero under this particular budget. The right to know law, as you saw, that under the fire budget there was $300. We still allocated $300. The total budget that was requested is $1,800. Allocated was $300. Total public safety, that was requested, $1,532,019. Allocated on the no override, $1,287,620. Highway Department. Requested for the highway superintendent was $58,360. We allocated $60,000. Somebody's going to say, gee, you're giving him a raise. No. The assumption that you saw earlier was combining two departments. That person is going to have more responsibility under that. If we can get somebody for that, we'll probably get a bargain, basically. Highway Department salaries requested $310,675. Allocated on no override, $350,000. That's they could end up supplementing both the highway and the cemetery. Highway Department expenses requested $78,050. Allocated on no override, $50,000. Unknown overtime requested $2,800. Allocated zero. This is when I tell you these figures, it looks like they actually got more money as a highway department, but when you combine that with the cemetery, it's really not. They requested $449,855. What was allocated, what in the joining, and you'll see some other monies also on the cemetery, because we did not put these again separated because we can only recommend. We cannot end up putting them by stature. That's something that the select board has to do. So there's $460,000. Under town vehicle maintenance, requested $45,143, allocated $45,143. Unknown overtime allowance. Requested 800, allocated 0, and that would be under the highway department overtime or within their budget. Town vehicle and maintenance, machinery maintenance expense. Here's one we debated about extensively. Why is our budget so high for maintenance? We looked at other communities. It's because they have new equipment. We're stuck with a high maintenance because we have older equipment. We haven't been able to get an override for new vehicles for a number of years. Requested $102,350. We allocated the $102,350. The actual amount of the no override budget is $147,493, which actually takes the $800 out. Snow and ice removal expense. Requested $125,000, allocated $125,000. We saw no need to end up reducing this and getting into the same position we were, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, where we had ended up having $165,000 and we went down to $125,000. And because of state statutes, if we went over, because we actually lowered it, anything spent over that $125,000 had to end up, we had to go to a special town meeting and actually allocate that into the budget. So rather than do that, we left it at the same. We weren't going to end up lowering that. That's disastrous. We would rather see us end up, in some years we were probably deficit spend. We looked at a lot of communities, and a lot of communities deficit spend. This year, as you heard, $53,000 was deficit spending for the snow and ice budget. When you look at the actual impact of $53,000 for deficit spending, it represents a little less than 10 cents on the dollar, per se. But it also says that if we could end up, and there was one year where, I think it was the year before, that we actually came in, we had 125 budgeted, and we actually came in for 125, or thereabouts. Is that correct, Bud?
That's right.
Okay. I want to make sure. So, some years you may end up hitting that, some years you may deficit spend. Street lighting expense. Street lighting expense went down. They requested $20,415. Why is that? Because they've gone to a lot of LED lighting throughout the community. So that's a savings of around $6,000 for the community. And we kept it at that. Solid waste disposal expense. This is a contract that we have for our solid waste disposal for all our buildings. $6,360. We kept it at $6,360. Cemetery department. This is what the assumption that those two are going to be combined. There was discussion on, as you heard, we had talked to the town administrator that they could end up seeing if by statutes it can be done within the budget, or does it have to end up being as a warrant article? That's still being looked at. The impact there is that shared resources, like other communities. So you eliminate the salary portions of both of those, including the assistant's wages. The assistant is a 20-hour-a-week job with benefits. When you have benefits, the cost of the $14,581 is just part of it. you now have to look into the amount of money that you would have to pay as retirement later on. So that actually ups the amount. That also ends up other benefits such as insurance or whatever. If you have a part-time person, there's no insurance. Cemeteries and parks department expenses. They requested $46,119. We allocated $20,000. Under this particular one, there was a number of items that were eliminated. Example, if we consolidate them, we wouldn't have to rent a trailer for roughly $2,200 a year. I've been in that trailer. I was very unhappy with the fact that we have a trailer that is not in that good of a shape. We'd probably be better off having the individual, whoever is for the cemetery department, either in the highway department, they end up addressing the needs of the community as far as people looking at the cemeteries, or we have other buildings. We will probably end up having Scout Hall open. We will probably have office space in East Templeton as the selectmen have gone there. So there's other places that we can end up having. I know that one of the things they were saying is, what do we want to do? We want to take what if somebody wants to meet? One of the people for the graves want to end up meeting. We have other places. I just cannot, the board just could not see having somebody go into a trailer versus a nice office area that would be somewhere else. It doesn't give us a good representation for somebody, especially coming out of town. The soldiers and sailors' grave, as well as the firemen's, both had $600. We kept them at $600. We actually asked, because we see other communities have organizations that actually put out flags and end up donating flags. We asked that question, and I guess that was asked previously, and by the cemetery folks, and they didn't get any response back to end up doing some volunteer as far as it. So reducing that cemetery budget down to just the expenses. Now you have to take and put those expenses, if we combine, back into where the highway is. So the actual bottom line number is not really accurate as far as when you combine them. You have to take it end up, like I said, with the cemetery. The overall total public works and facilities requested budget was $972,273. What we allocated on the no override is $780,468. One of the things that people in this community have got to understand is there's no override. This is the impact to these departments. We have to take and allocate somewhere. So if you start cutting these departments, you're going to start to lose some service. Board of Health agent, as you heard, going from a full-time agent to a per diem. Requested $63,141 to $15,000. One of the things that we found out was that the personnel policy for someone under 5 years is only about a couple weeks vacation. This individual has 5 weeks vacation. In talking with people from other communities that work in like City Hall at Gardner, I happen to be talking with somebody there, I won't mention who. They were appalled to end up thinking that somebody with that level of that many years of service was getting 5 weeks vacation. It's unheard of. It's unheard of in government. That's costing us. So if the individual is gone for a month and a half out of a year, that's an impact on our budget. We're paying too much, is what we looked at. And we looked at 30 communities again, as far as that particular cost. Health Board office salary. requested $26,810. We allocated $15,174. There was a lot of discussion as to how to allocate that money within that budget. We broke it up between two people because ultimately the commissioners in that department are going to end up deciding whether they want, that they can end up having an office assistant or not. It's not up to us. Board of Health office expenses, $4,928 versus allocated under no override $2,500. Landfill monitoring, requested $5,000, allocated $5,000. Board of Health hazardous waste in bulk, they requested $2,800, allocated $0. Going from requested $102,679 down to $37,674. Council of Aging. Director requested $17,810. We basically level funded that at $17,300. Council of Aging salaries requested $57,678, allocated $53,750. And looking at that budget, there was 3 new items on that budget. We brought that to the attention of the interim administrator because one of the things that in the past has happened is that bringing on a new position, the town generally votes on it in the town warrant. I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, they had asked for some help for the kitchen, and they actually got a grade and a step position approved at town meeting. So that's a question that we had, and we presented that to the administrator. We ended up still putting it into the budget, but the question is does the town still have to vote on it? Or does the administrator able to end up putting a step and grade position? It's not up to us to end up allocating that. You'll see it later on. We actually have another position other than the 3 that came into question here. Council of Aging expenses requested $31,783, allocated $27,000. If you're going to have a new senior center, we knew that we ended up having to do some additional level of support, but we still end up in those particular areas had to end up making cuts. Requested $107,272, allocated $98,050. Veterans Service District. Under this, we are no longer under the Veteran Service District, the Quabbin District. At a meeting within the last month, I can't remember the actual date, an individual stepped forward and ended up saying that he would end up doing that. One of the things he ended up talking about is the fact that the level of service that we get from the district is probably not only about 5 hours for the entire month. Here's another salary that, I'm sorry, Selectman, but to end up allocating $20,000, the question the board had is, again, in the salary matrix, what grade, what step, how much are you going to pay that individual? Are you going to pay him for 20 hours? 40 hours? How do we save money? We still kept it at $20,000. We don't know if it was just a handshake agreement or by contract. On the budget was requested $92,000 for veterans benefits. We allocated $60,000. And there's a couple of veterans on the advisory board. One of them who was very involved in a Marine Corps league. So that's a kind of a soft spot to us as veterans. But we know that this segment of the community still needs to be serviced. So we level funded it. If they can cut it any more than what we had last year would be a disservice. In fact, in talking with that individual, he has indicated that he's talked to a number of people, and they're actually he's looking at actually increasing some of the allocations to some of the veterans, etc. Requested $112,000, allocated $80,000. Under human services, requested $321,951, allocated $215,724. Boynton Library salaries, requested $45,488. That was a 1% increase. We actually level funded that at $44,871. They requested for library expenses, which is books and material, $22,045. Last year, they were allocated $12,424. The town had to seek a waiver at that particular level. As you heard, we looked at a lot of other libraries. We allocated $15,000. At that particular level, in talking with the director over there, we wouldn't have to seek a waiver, so that we could continue to have the services for our community here, as well as the ability for the citizens to go out to other libraries in the community, other communities. Recreation Commission, they requested $20,200. We allocated $10,500. Recreation Commission expenses, they requested $16,063. We allocated $7,500. They requested $36,263. We allocated $18,000. Arts Council. Arts Council came in with a budget of $91. They had a budget of $100, so we just kept it at that for all intents and purposes. And they have used some of that, I believe it's for a post office box. Historical Commission expenses. We got no request from them. We looked at the budget to actual, they have not used any money. So we didn't, under the no override, we did not allocate anything. Cable Commission salary, Cable Commission expenses. Zero has been there for quite a while. Basically, that commission is self-funding after talking with those individuals. Veterans and Memorial Day services. Requested $1,500, allocated $1,500. Interest on temporary debt, requested $20,000. Under this particular budget, allocated $15,000. Interest on anticipated, tax anticipated notes, we borrowed 2.6 or 2.5 million? 2.6 million, okay. And the interest on that was $4,400. We allocated that. Requested was $24,400. We allocated $19,400. Montezuma Regional Planning Commission. This is an assessment by them. $2,407. We kept it at $2,407. That's I don't know if that's a contract or whatever, but we didn't want to end up getting into anything. School committee salaries, that's the stipends. We haven't paid stipends in the last 2 or 3 years. This is, believe it or not, when we started looking at the actual green sheets that we received, all this was on the green sheet in previous years, but was never shown at town meeting, and we still don't understand why. Last year, the approved budget by a town article was $1,391,046. Original request was for $1,444,046. We allocated $1,287,046. We had already gone through the budget pretty much to this particular point, and we're going to finish up on the next time we met. When on a Friday, the accountant called me up because I had asked him to take and verify the information. Came up and said that the feasibility study money wasn't on the long-term debt, which is $157,000. In talking with him, he said, we actually haven't gone and collect from MSBA what's the money that we've already spent. He actually came to my meeting the following time we met, and there was a discussion as to whether to include it or not include it. We didn't include the 157 on this particular budget, because offset for that, and it all depends on whether the school, under the contract that the selectmen just signed, if they end up putting in for that money, they have to end up getting that through to MSBA by the 12th of June. There's a risk there. If we end up putting the debt on and put the revenues on the revenue side, it's $63,000 and more in revenue, but we couldn't take the chance that it would come through for next year's budget if it didn't get processed by June 30th. So we left it off. Total town charges $6,199,822. We actually cut $825,244 from the requested amount from all the departments. Let's go to the revenue and expense sheet, where this all rolls up to. Revenue.
Are we going to be able to buy a copy of this at some point?
When it's voted on.
No, it's public record right now.
Yeah.
Why can't we get what you have now?
Oh, we will after. I mean, this is a draft form. This may change.
I don't care.
Somebody had asked, and this could end up changing even after tonight.
Well, that's fine, but we still would like to see the numbers that we're working on.
That's fine. We'll make sure it's available.
Good, available tonight.
The tax levy. The tax levy from the recap sheet includes FY14 tax levy plus debt exclusion plus 2.5% increase on the Prop 2.5 plus the snow and ice deficit. You didn't hear me talk about new growth. After talking with the deputy assessor again after Monday night's meeting, the assessors have gone out And they haven't even come up with $5,000 worth of new growth for the community.
I was told 52,000 from there.
That was last year.
14, it's not 15's budget. 52.
Or 14, that's what it, exactly.
That represents less than 1%, 1 cent. To include that is minuscule, so we did not even put it into this budget. This particular budget. State aid, as to the local aid, is $1,397,159. Local receipts, projected $2,164,126. Remember, I ended up saying that the retirement portion of the budget needs to be reduced because of the light and water. They pay in, and it comes under miscellaneous under this particular number. So on the final version of this, because we didn't make a lot of changes, we still presented what we had. It would have to be reduced by the light and the water retirement under that. So I believe it's $1,900,000-something, as I recall. NSBA reimbursement, remember I just talked about that in the 220. We toyed with putting that on. Like I said, there's a benefit in putting it on because it gives us $63,000 more of revenue, but there's a chance that we won't get it. It could be on the following year. Free cash, there is no free cash for us to end up using against the budget. Transfer from stabilization for the cemetery truck, which is in the 5th year of a lease, is $11,045. Additional stabilization, there's a total of 5 articles that the selectmen have for transferring for the office move. $40,500. The light and water department has not voted any money for the town. Ambulance receipts is $180,000. So the total revenue was $12,845,166. On the expense side, town charges. We just took those from the green sheet, put those on here. $6,199,882. Ambulance expense, we got the revenue, now we have the expense, $180,000. Narragansett Regional School, $5,130,328. That's an increase of approximately $145,000 over last year. That impacts both budgets, with or without. It's not up to the advisory board to end up putting on the town warrant an override for that amount. It's up to the selectmen. Narragansett debt, this is for the roof, the debt exclusion. They voted this number on 3/26, $431,969. Monty Tech, actually they ended up sending us a second allocation. Actually, they went down about $1,000. $582,508. Special articles. This is for the scholarship, Beta account software, assesses tricentennial recertification, and mapping. The mapping is $4,000, certification is $30,000, Beta is $13,000 something, and the scholarship for $2,500. Even after we had these numbers, I ended up getting a document that says that the scholarship committee wants to end up having $5,000, which means that if we up this to $5,000, we have to find another $2,500 worth of cuts somewhere to balance the budget. Office articles for the town office move. This is without CPC. CPC happens, it's $25,000 less. 40,500. Capital articles for the truck, $11,045. Abatements, state fees, and deficit. Cherry sheet showed $53,261. Abatement allowance, $113,028. And snow and ice, $53,000. For a grand total, $219,289. Total expenditures, $12,845,166. Balanced budget with no override. At that point, Selectmen, I'm looking for discussion on your part, and then we'll end up voting on what we want to do with the snow override budget.
My primary concern is seeing that the fiscal year starts in 2 months, particularly when it comes to the highway cemetery department. And I'm not even talking about whether or not we want to do that at all, but even if we voted to do it, 2 months to accomplish the legalities that would be necessary to do that, I don't know if that is a feasible, that would be my concern. Again, this budget is without the override, which means there'll be state intervention anyway, so a lot of that will likely be out of our hands to begin with, but I think that it's still obviously our job to do our due diligence here. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Let me just say this, is that joining the two is one option. The other option that we looked at because of the trailer, et cetera, combining them into the highway department and still separate as departments. You'd have to reallocate some of the money under both of those budgets. So you'd still maintain them as entities, per se, if that was not something that we could end up doing.
At the request of the advisory board, I did refer this matter to town council. It's been over a week. If you don't have a response, sometimes you have to light the fire under town council, so that's what I'll do tomorrow. Get a response on this to see what would be required, and get that out to everyone.
I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that our veterans
Account has a good chunk of change in it from the budget to actual. There's $21,673.47 from now until June 30th. Traditionally, what was happening was that Quabbin would send us a very large bill in May, and we would have to do a transfer because the $21,000 wouldn't be enough. But I think for this year, it will be enough, and that was budgeted at $60,000. The other thing that we are going to need to deal with is a deficit in town vehicle gas. But we have a surplus in diesel, but it's more than the 5%, so we can't just meet with the advisory board and do a transfer. So we're going to probably do an article for that. I don't know if we're going to have another special town meeting after the annual to try to deal with some of these things before June 30th, but we may have to do that, which is another added expense. So I'm just making you aware of some of the things. I've looked, this is the first time I saw these numbers, and the advisory board had a very difficult job. It's going to be difficult for the whole town if the override fails. There will be cuts and there will be significant reduction in services because we just don't have the money to provide the services that people are accustomed to. I don't know of any other way consolidation is one of the steps that we needed to take, whether the override passes or not. We just can't continue down this road. It's unsustainable. So, I have no suggestions on changes to make to the presentation that the advisory board presented.
One of the things, Julie, that is possible for the fuel is that the advisory board still has money. It's unforeseen that we're in that particular position. That could be presented to us, towards the later part of the year. We still have some money for FY14 under that. When the DOR came in, they basically, under Mr. Markle's scenario of B, he had 10,000 being pulled out of that. The DOR, basically, the individual, Dennis Mountain, he basically said, no way. They need to take and still have that amount of money left in, especially with this amount of time left to go to the end of the year. So I'm just saying that that's a possibility to take it, end up helping supplement that particular portion of the budget.
I know we're also running low as far as town council goes. I think we have a couple $100 left between now and the end of the year. And we haven't even done town meeting yet. So that's going to need another transfer. And I'm not sure how the salary account for the accountant and all that is going to play out. So I'm not sure that there's enough money left in the emergency reserve account to cover all these.
Because we know that there is one more month for the forensic accountant that still, for the month of March. We had already addressed that as part of the emergency reserve already this year.
And looking at, speaking to the presentation for fiscal year 15 that was just done, I think that there are legitimate and good arguments to make as to why most of those cuts should not occur. The difficulty is that they have to come from somewhere. And it's a difficult task, obviously, to make those kind of cuts, and the main expenses that we have as a town are salaries. So while it is not pleasant, obviously, for anyone, particularly the people being laid off, to look at those layoffs, the money, if the override fails, has to be cut. I think it is obviously my preference that those cuts would not have to take place, and that we can continue to, in a more fiscally responsible manner, but continue providing the services that we have provided to the town. Ultimately, though, that decision rests with the voters. So I don't think anyone denies that if the override fails on Monday, that it will change dramatically the way that the town does business. There will be changes in every department that will be felt in every department. And those changes will be drastic and severe. However, if that's the will of the voters, that is the will of the voters, and we are obligated to follow through with that.
If I could just make a comment, I'm not sure that residents are aware that yesterday the Department of Revenue sent the so-called deficit legislation to me, and I distributed it to members of the advisory board and members of the Board of Selectmen. Basically, we're looking at the budget for fiscal 15. If the override does not pass, the town still has a gap of $505,000 in our fiscal 14 budget. That's illegal, and the deficit legislation would basically provide a state loan to the town, which would be paid back over 500 years. 5 years. That would be a better deal, but it'll be paid back over 5 years. I'll see if we can get that posted online. It's worth reading. I think what stands out when you read the legislation is that the town is going to be in a straitjacket. And you'll notice that in the language of the legislation, phone calls are going to have to be made to Boston for permission to undertake spending of all kinds, and any kind of initiatives, as well as ordinary spending. So I think everyone should take a look at that and see what's coming our way if we cannot close that deficit. Just one other comment. First time I looked at the budget in February when I came here, the one item that stood out above all others was the $100,000 that the town spends to repair vehicles in the highway department. That's an incredible amount of money for vehicle repairs. Nothing can be done about it now. Obviously, this is not a time to go out and borrow money to buy new vehicles, but that amount can be cut down significantly. And the savings can be used to service a bond issue, which I wouldn't dare suggest for now, but perhaps next year, if the town gets out from under this financial cloud, it would make sense to issue a 5-year bond and modernize that equipment, as opposed to continuing to spend an enormous sum of money on repairs and maintenance, and then you still have very old equipment. I have met with the highway superintendent a number of times just in the couple months that I've been here, where he comes in and said, this vehicle broke down this morning, that vehicle broke down. This is really a self-defeating policy of keeping old vehicles and doing repairs. And I think one way that it could work would be to take a portion of the repair money, set it aside to service a bond issue. Won't increase the tax rate, nevertheless, that kind of expense can be reduced very significantly and to the benefit of everyone.
At this time, one issue that I'd like to bring up, we can, there are, I guess, two schools of thought with this. We can vote now on this budget so that the townspeople going into election, going to the ballots on Monday will know what the proposed cuts are. The other option would obviously be to table it until the meeting following to see if making a determination on this is necessary. So obviously it's the will of the board as to whether you would prefer to vote on this now and give the voters the knowledge of what will happen, or whether you would like to hold off until we determine if it's necessary to make this particular cut. And obviously I'll accept a motion to vote one way or another on this.
We vote it now, our hands would be tied if we need to make any kinds of changes based
Yeah.
on the outcome of Monday.
I feel like
Thank you.
I don't necessarily have the experience to say whether or not we should vote it now. I do have a few questions, though. Virginia, I wanted to clarify something that under the Communication Commission, Will accidentally said 195,000. It's 190, but I didn't want to interrupt. I think when you're reading numbers, it happens to me a lot, I transpose.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify that for you. I think one of my questions was, I would not have wanted your job, number one, to do all this. But under the assessors, there was 25,000, this was last year, I think, 25,000 for reval and assessors mapping, which was not brought over as anything, zero.
That's under
So is that something different? Did I miss
That's
something?
under a warrant article for $30,000 for the revale. That's a separate article.
Okay, but if that's voted in, then what does that do to this budget?
It doesn't do anything to the budget because it's a separate warrant article. One of the things with the revale that we found out, different than the mapping could go on the actual town budget, because that can end up being used, and if it rolls into the next year, say, as an example, a charge rolls into the next year, the assessors have the ability to come to the advisory as an unexpected bill because they rolled over one bill over to the next year. They spent their $4,000, and now they have another $1,000 or something. Okay, so that's possible. With the as far as the assessment, that's something that if you put it on the green sheet and it's not used, it goes into the general fund. If it's on a warrant article, it can be encumbered so that they get, and once they get to the tricentennial, that money's still available. So that's the difference. It was on those budget sheets to show you what they were previously. So that's why it says warrant article. Is there any other question on?
No. Yeah, I wrote down a lot, but I can't. I feel like I have to digest it all.
Well, believe me, this is all the documentation for this budget. I have a flash drive with multiple times that each department had. It's a job just trying to keep track of it, as our administrator is well aware from his, and he's done a much larger budget. When you start having departments allocate more and more money or just changing their budget during the year, you have different iterations, and it's hard to keep track of that. In fact, going into, after we had finished all of this, I had no less than 3 departments asked to take either by email or approach me, can we change our budget? And I says, you ended up giving your budgets at the reviews. It's too late now. We've gone through that. We can't be trying to end up changing at this later date. I mean, there's too many changes. At some point, you have to put a stake in the ground and say, this is where we are.
Okay, so my other question was, when you were going through the revenue and expense, you made a comment that the school budget increased by $145,000.
That's correct.
And you said that would need an override? You mentioned what does that mean?
The increase in that budget, as it was handled last year, was to end up having a warrant article for an override for their increase. The advisory board doesn't have that power to end up doing that. That's something that is really for the selectmen. We ended up receiving that amount of money. It was put into the budget. We're just noting that it's $145,000 more. It's up to the select board whether they want to take and end up having the 145 as an additional override question or not. That's really what I was talking about. Does that explain it?
No. Well, yes, to a certain degree, but when you look at the revenue and the expenditure, it's $12,845,166, and then it's $12,845,166 with the $5,130,328.
That's correct.
So why does it balance then, and it's not $145,000?
Yeah, we did actually
We actually put it
include.
in.
We did actually
Oh.
include
It's
the
actually in there.
145.
We didn't
include-
change,
Oh.
whatever the school gave
Okay,
us,
That's, I was just asking you.
whatever
to
the school
clarify.
gave us for their budget is what's on the green sheet. We didn't change their number. The only people that have the ability to change it
Okay.
are the selectmen for an
Oh, so that's why I
override.
think I was confused, like why it wasn't.
We only
Oh,
pointed out that this is
Okay,
$145,000 more than last year.
okay.
And as selectmen, we have other tools that we can use besides the town meeting warrant to address the assessment from the schools. There was legislation that was just passed last July. I talked about it before, and the board chose not to do it. So
Okay.
it may be something that we have to look at, or maybe if Plan B is in play, the control board may ask us to do that as well.
Thanks.
So are there any motions or any further questions?
I'm sorry, Doug, I cut you off, so I would like to know what you
Yeah.
were saying.
Yeah, I was just saying that, I'm concerned.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I My concern was if we vote the budget now, are we, prematurely tying our hands to having to make all these cuts? Because this is really the first time we've seen the numbers as well. So we've not even had an opportunity to digest the numbers and agree with, yep, this is the right way or the wrong way to cut. I applaud the advisory board for the amount of work they've done, the amount of effort they have put into it. And I think this is a great, start at looking at the problem. So I'm just a little concerned with voting it now.
Well, there's two, correct?
Right,
There's two budgets. One
There's
is if
another
the
budget
override passes.
with the override.
So this budget, we would be voting to only use if the override fails on Monday, and then there's another
Right, we have
budget
another budget that we'll be going through.
now, too. So,
Yes.
But if we vote this budget now, let's just use the highway and cemetery, for example. So this budget is saying that we have to combine those two. What if we say, okay, yep, we're going to adopt that budget, and now, 4 weeks from now, we realize, oh, there's no way we can do that, or even if we put them in the same building but keep them as two separate departments, we can't honor this budget because the cemetery now only has $21,000.
well,
That's
Before town meeting, this budget, if that's the case, okay, we would have to take and end up allocating some money out of the budget for the cemetery department if we still join them together. We realize that. When we talked on Monday, I was actually trying to end up doing that under other budgets and seeing other scenarios. And I had alluded to that. These two budgets that we're presenting to you tonight is what the advisory board has gone through. The other scenarios are something that, depending on what happens, we as a board are going to have to meet again and discuss those scenarios if things change, that they can end up reallocating money under the budget.
and the town will be voting on the budget in 2.5 weeks, so we'll have to make a decision. We have another meeting, I know, 5 days before the annual, that we could then make that decision, so that would give us